Congressman Rick Crawford with us. Let's get right into it.
The Paul Harrell Program.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Rob Spencer.
Paul, it's an honor to be here as always, and it's an honor to have an in-studio guest with us, Congressman Rick Crawford from our very own state here in Arkansas. Looking forward to the discussion with basically everything that's going on and how the federal government reacts to certain situations. I know I've got a few questions and interested to get into this discussion.
Absolutely. So, Congressman Rick Crawford, welcome to the show, sir. We really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, good to be with you.
I guess the first... What's weird is go all the way back to when I first started in radio, 2009 or 2010. In there, that's when you were running for the first time,
Yep.
and I think you were one of my first interviews.
Yeah.
And I just want to say it is incredible that you have been as successful as you have been in D.C. representing the 1st District, but now you are the head of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You're the chair. And that is something incredible for the people of Arkansas and the people in particular of the 1st District.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I've been on the committee for 8 years. Didn't see that coming. You probably know I had been sort of lobbying for transportation and infrastructure. And it's amazing how, these opportunities present themselves in ways that you might not have ever anticipated. And that's what happened, and so here I am now chairing the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which is, I can't talk about everything, but I will tell you this, it's a very fulfilling job. People always ask me, are you having fun? And the answer to that question is no. It's not fun. And depends on what day you ask. You might,
Sure.
It's all about your attitude. Do you try to make things as positive as you can and whatnot? But it is extremely fulfilling, and what's most fulfilling about it is the daily engagement in the effort to protect America and to protect Arkansas. And there are some real tangible things that people don't necessarily really know. Cyber intrusions, for example, are one area, and we've seen the impact of that here in the 1st District of Arkansas. Biosecurity, how do we protect our food supply? That's, believe it or not, that's in our lane. There's a reason it's in our lane. People were asking questions about how did this Aggie get on the Intel Committee, but it was because of things like biosecurity, and I've found a way to drive these issues into the lane of national security. Food security is national security. We got to protect our food supply. So that becomes now, what they call a Title 50, priority. We've got to protect ourselves. Transportation infrastructure. We've got to protect ourselves from threats there as well. So even though I'm on those other committees, I've always tried to find the nexus among those committee assignments, and that is part and parcel of how I got on HPSI and how I became chairman of the committee.
Wow. Rob, I know you were interested in asking about Charlie Kirk.
Sure. Of course, just general reactions, where were you when you got the news? And more specifically to the point is, when such a high-profile person, which we've not seen in many, many years, is assassinated like that, how does that affect the intel community? Are there special alerts that are sent out? How do you guys receive that information, and what happens?
I'll be honest with you. Here's how I found out about it, and this probably come as no surprise. But I was in my office in D.C., and you start seeing things pop up on your phone. Shooting at Charlie Kirk event, and I'm like, before I could even process all this, I got a text message from my son, who's in college. He's like, "Dad, they shot Charlie Kirk."
Wow.
My son, who's 20, which tells you how attuned young people are to what's going on, and how attuned they were to Charlie Kirk. And, just sort of watched that evolve through the course of the day. And I mean, you kind of just, the sense of dread immediately, like, I saw the video, and like, there was no easy way to spin this. There was no rosy picture.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And so, I mean, I'm sure people that knew him obviously had a very emotional response. I had kind of an emotional response. I've been watching Charlie Kirk, over the years, and particularly over the last year or two, and seeing how he had evolved personally. and how he was, I mean, really a warrior for Jesus. And he was leading with that. And before he was ever assassinated, I was starting to, just as I was watching Charlie Kirk, I was starting to feel a level of shame in my own life about how is this kid, 30 years old, 31 years old, just such a forthright warrior for Christ.
Unashamed.
Amen.
Unashamed. And like that I was kind of coming under conviction about, I've got this platform. I need to be, if this 31-year-old young man can accomplish, to say nothing of the fact that just he was a brilliant young man. I think he had an eidetic memory, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're particularly intelligent just because you can recall things, but it wasn't just his ability to recall things. It was his ability to synthesize information and put it out there to young people in a way that made them respond. And the evidence of that is my 20-year-old son texting me immediately.
Yeah.
And so, we've got a lot of answers to answer for when we're called. And I think he's going to have a great answer. I mean, I have no doubt that he's with Jesus now, and it was a well done,
Yeah.
and good and faithful servant.
Amen. And now we're at the point now where the blood of the martyrs are the seeds of the church, and what we saw at that memorial. It could be the start of a national revival, or maybe it was. We've got, people online saying, hey, I'm buying a suit for the first time and going to church. And that's actually, in my opinion, the real measure. Is this going to lead to in the church growing, the American church in general growing with people, repenting and turning to Christ? I could not believe, as somebody who grew up, Rick, in the 90s, and, it was very much the rise of atheism, where atheism is considered somehow neutral and not a worldview that can oppress the Christian worldview, but the Christian worldview will oppress the atheist worldview. But to hear our leaders, to hear Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, to hear Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to hear these people boldly proclaiming Jesus Christ, I never would have even imagined that was possible, and yet here we are.
This was like almost like a tent revival, or the old camp meeting of the old days that we hear about from our parents, growing up, when they would go to camp meeting or they would go to a tent revival, and they'd have the evangelists come in and all this. But it's also a time that these people were giving their testimony. And I think what Charlie Kirk did was embolden people to give their testimony and unashamed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if that catches fire, then I think we have hope in this country.
Amen.
And we've seen unfortunately, conversely, the negative side of it. We've just seen this sick underbelly that's always there. We understand that there are evil hearts that are going to say and do evil things. But at the same time, to see it displayed, so many people just doing dances and celebrating the death of someone, and calling him a fascist, which is the most ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, name another time that a fascist has said, whoever disagrees with me the most, come to the front of the line and let's have a discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the opposite
Right.
of fascism.
Totally.
We're going to suppress any opposition. And he was a moderate voice in terms of he's nonviolence, right? He's not going to insult the people that he's debating with. And I saw probably the best explanation that I could have imagined for it. And they said they didn't kill Charlie Kirk because of what he said. They killed him because people were listening to him. Mm-hmm. And how many people has that man led to Christ? How many people has that man got them to just sort of rethink these core liberal beliefs that they have, where, there's no facts behind it. And for that, Charlie Kirk is going to be remembered far beyond his death. I think we're going to blink in a year, and Turning Point is going to be tenfold what it is now.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. And the interesting thing about him, and there are very few people like him in this regard, in that he did not operate in the gray space. And this is what there is: good and evil.
Amen.
Sure.
There's good and evil, and he made a clear distinction, and that upsets people who live in the gray space, who try to equivocate and try to keep a foot over here.
Yeah.
I think at some point in time you've got to It's like the old song, you got to stand for something or you fall for anything. And I mean, he stood firmly for what he believed. He didn't make any apologies for his belief, and that made people uncomfortable. And I've seen people that had that effect on folks that were, it wasn't that they were, like you said, it wasn't what he said as much as how he said it, and he did it in a way that made people uncomfortable. He reached out to people in love. He was tolerant. He was respectful. He wasn't the boogeyman that they tried to paint him as, in that he did respect people. He wasn't bombastic, but at the same time, he was, hard and fast in what he believed.
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that there's no way anyone could argue that he didn't fully and with his whole heart believe everything that he said, but it wasn't coming from just some sort of theoretical belief. He's a very, very studied, learned man. He wasn't extremely educated, right? He dropped out of college and all of that. But specifically to your role on the Intel Committee, with such a high-profile assassination, were there communications there? Were there alerts? Anything of that nature?
We were as surprised by this as everybody else was. We didn't see this coming, and that is to say that if there was any kind of intelligence that we could have shared to prevent this, certainly we would have. And then the other thing I have to say is that's not what we do on the committee. We do not process, analyze information. We oversee the people who do. So we oversee the intelligence community. That is to say, I'm not an intelligence analyst. I'm not a spy. I'm not a collector. None of those things. My responsibility is to oversee those people who do those jobs. That said, I mean, we do get a lot of information in the process of exercising our oversight authority over these IC elements. I never saw anything to indicate that there was a threat to Charlie Kirk. Now, Charlie Kirk, as a matter of course, had a security detail that he paid for. But when you're a high-profile individual, that makes sense. Elon Musk has a very well paid for, highly trained cadre of personal, protection. Of course, because he's the richest man in the world, or he was until a week or two ago. But those high-profile, high-net-worth people are always going to have a need for security. So he did have security, but there was, at least from my perspective, I never saw anything that indicated that there was an imminent threat, other than just the typical, name calling and the belligerence that you see,
chat room stuff,
those kinds of things.
Well, of course, you've got the media that's fanning all of this with their own propaganda. But this is a perfect segue. So, and we've said this on the air. You and Tulsi Gabbard, with the release of the report, basically exposing that Obama ordered fake intelligence to be created and that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton and not on Trump, have, in my opinion, uncovered possibly the greatest political scandal, the greatest crimes, the greatest criminal conspiracy in the history of our country. And my question is, you've had that report, you've known what it said for years and years and years, and so psychologically, I just have to know, how did you do it? How did you keep your mouth shut when there's all these people that are literally, lying, like actively deceiving people to get away with it? Obviously, I know you can't reveal classified information, but was it taxing on you psychologically to know the truth and you couldn't say anything?
So to give you a sense of, the things that we can control, what I can control is my behavior. I can't control other people's behavior. We would sit in a classified setting, reviewing classified information, maybe in a hearing or a briefing, and people like Adam Schiff would get up, walk out to a media spray, divulge classified information, and walk back in. And we watched this go on in real time. And then, we're seeing, through the process of the investigation, we're seeing this information like, how are these people going forward? And, Adam Schiff, I've got unequivocal evidence. He had years to produce his unequivocal evidence that basically showed that Trump was a Russian asset and he was colluding with Putin. It wasn't just that he was colluding with the Russians. he was colluding with Putin, according to Schiff, and he had evidence of it.
Yeah.
When in fact, right the opposite was taking place. He was the one talking to Russian assets in the process of trying to get information to make the case after the fact. And yeah, to your point, can you compartmentalize information? And you have to serve on this committee. When you go down there 3 floors below the Capitol, and you receive the information that we receive, you have to have the capacity to compartmentalize that and walk away and go engage and forget that you just heard that. And then be able to, you go back down the next day and flip that switch to be able to re-engage and address that from an oversight perspective. This went on for years. You know, it would probably have been very cathartic to have been able to go out in real time and say, no, that's not true, he's lying, and we got the evidence. You can't do that. We didn't have the clearance to do it. It wasn't what happened with Director Gabbard was she says once she knew we had those documents, which were our work product, by the way, once we had those documents in our custody, she calls me, hey, can I come over? Very respectful. Can I come over and view those documents? Absolutely. She's Director of National Intelligence. She's certainly cleared for that. Keeping in mind, of course, the approach that she took, having been a former member of Congress, knowing that this was a HPSI work product and knowing that there was an appropriate way to address this, and she did it, and she came and read it, and she calls me, she goes, wow, this is worse than I imagined. Yep, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
And she says, do you care if we do a classification review because we'd like to make this public? That, to your question, the relief
Oh my goodness.
to be able to say yes to that.
Yes, ma'am. Here it is.
Absolutely. You know, go right ahead. And she did, and didn't do anything without consulting. This was a hand-in-glove effort between myself and Director Gabbard, who had the authority. We had the material. She had the authority.
Wow.
And so this was, I think, in the interests of making sure the American people, there are people to this day who would read that report and still believe Adam Schiff.
Yes.
And then there are folks, and you're not going to change their minds. The ones that needed to hear it are the folks who needed to understand that, you know, maybe their fears might have been confirmed, that there is a deep state. I was one of those guys. Before I got on the Intelligence Committee, there's no deep state. That's a conspiracy theory. No, that's false. There are, you know, these civil servants buried in the bureaucracy that are there for their purposes, and they believe that they run the government and not through the consent of the governed. That's why I'm here, through the consent of the governed. You guys sent me up there for that purpose, to be governed with your consent, not to cover stuff up.
Right.
Not to tamp down your concerns about, is there a deep state structure in place? No, you sent me with your consent, with your vote, to go up there to Washington to represent Arkansas and Washington, not come back to Arkansas and represent Washington and Arkansas. That's my job. And, you know, I've really stuck to that. You know, heck, Paul, you know, I campaigned on that from the jump.
All those years ago.
All those years ago. That, to me, was a difference maker. And I've stuck to that. It's not my job to go up there and try to aid and abet a bureaucracy. It's my job under Article 1 of the Constitution to exercise oversight over the other two branches.
So, kind of a follow-up to this. Adam Schiff obviously dealing in classified, you know, intel when he's not supposed to. There's now rumors that, you know, James Comey's going to be indicted for lying to Congress when I think I think he needs to be indicted for a lot more than that. But hey, you know, if we got to Al Capone this thing, I'm okay with that. You know, any way you can get him. But there's just so many. I mean, there's so many people. So can you speak to accountability? Because I came to the conclusion last night as we were talking about this interview. If there's no accountability for these people that I think have the intel oligarch, as I call them, that have essentially run some sort of color revolution against the American people for the last decade, if not more, if there's no accountability for these people, are we even free? And that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I have to go back to when Comey was first coming before the intelligence community, the intelligence committee, and I got to tell you, and I was brand new to the committee, and I'm like, this can't be happening. I mean, I'm like, this is a steep learning curve. I'm trying to learn this job as a member of the committee, not as a member of Congress. I'd been a member of Congress for 3 terms, but I'm trying to learn the job of a HPSI member. That's a different set of responsibilities and it's a steep learning curve. And I'm trying to do that. And then we've got this. I'm like, so
wow.
I'm watching this guy come in, and I was hearing people that you know what, want to be careful with Comey because he may be the best friend we have in this whole process.
Wow.
I'm like, and you can probably, you go back and look at the record. I was really quiet. I was having this conversation on the way over here on the phone with somebody. I know what my limitations are. I'm not prepared to go rewire my house. I'm going to call an electrician to do that. I knew what my limitations were as a new member of HPSI. My job here is to learn what's going on, not to, create some kind of a profile for myself, but to be a responsible member. So I was watching this just in stunned silence, really, because on the one hand, I'm supposed to learn this. On the other hand, I'm watching what this guy's saying.
Right.
And I'm seeing, as the investigators are undertaking this investigation, like, we can't talk about this. To your point earlier, I mean, it's the frustration, unbelievable. So it was very vindicating for our committee and everybody that made a contribution to that, 2 staff in particular, one of which was essentially run out. And I'm not going to mention their names because it would be, wouldn't be prudent for me to do that. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to mention their names. But I can tell you these are 2 individuals who understood completely what was going on, who did yeoman's work on behalf of the American people to get to the truth. You've seen it. You've seen their work now because Director Gabbard went through, did the classification review and released it so that you could see it.
Right.
That's the work they did. Those are the people I trust, one of which is still on the committee. Another individual who I have known for years now was on the committee at the time, and I still am in contact with him. These are great American patriots that did their job in the face of scorn and abuse and, your career's over, you're dead to us, these kinds of things. And they did the right thing. And you've seen their work product.
I mean, did you, because basically you're really only able to discuss those things with people on the committee at that point. So are you looking around when you said you felt a little bit powerless, you're coming in here, you're learning, but also you're like, whoa, are you guys buying this?
Well,
and
the interesting thing is not only are you limited who you can talk with, but you're limited to where you can talk with them. And so, I'm on other committees, and I'm trying to learn this committee, and it's like, okay, I've got to go to an ag hearing, I've got to go to a T&I, a transportation infrastructure hearing, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and then I'm home in my district, and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, I do have this information weighing on me, and a thought will pop into my mind. I can't pick up the phone and call my friend on the committee. That's classified information, so I can't make a note of it. It's classified.
Wow.
So I've got to keep that
here.
Yeah,
that's very
filed
difficult.
on the hard drive till I can get back to D.C. And then have these conversations in the classified setting where it's appropriate to have those conversations. It's a lot that for years to carry around. So I can tell you the sort of the collective exhale of the people who were involved when Director Gabbard said, "Can we do the classification review and prepare this for public release?" You can't believe the level of relief and vindication for the people involved.
Yeah, that's incredible. But what I really do want to know, what about accountability, though? Do you think we're going to actually see some of these people be arrested? Adam Schiff, Clapper, Comey, Brennan.
You mentioned the Al Capone approach. Can we get Adam Schiff on mortgage fraud? Probably.
Yeah.
Could we have gotten him, or should we get him on some of these things? Yes, in a perfect world, and we've got evidence. Are we going to be able to make that case? I don't know. Do we have prosecutors in the DOJ that have enough intestinal fortitude to even go after the mortgage fraud? These are the questions we're going to be asking, because look, here you go. We've laid it out for you. And so, criminal referrals, all these other kinds of things that are taking place from various elements of the IC. They've got the opportunity now to make the decision: are we going to act on the part of the American people and impart a high degree of accountability for these folks who have chosen to deceive and to perpetrate what I think is the greatest political fraud on the American people since, I don't know, Boss Tweed. I don't know. I mean, you go down through history and look. I can't think of anything that even rises to this level. And there are a laundry list of individuals involved. Some of them, the high-profile names: James Comey, obviously, Clapper, Brennan. Obviously, those individuals need to be held to account. But what about others? Peter Strzok. He had the nerve to file a lawsuit, arguing that his First Amendment rights had been breached, and he was trying to get damages and all this. He is a scumbag of the lowest order in my estimation, and he should be held to account. There's others, a laundry list of individuals who were part of what we now know was Crossfire Hurricane. And that whole deal, the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, was a farce. We're seeing that now. And to give you a little bit of background on how an ICA is done, that typically takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months. They did this in 3 weeks.
Incredible.
They did this on the orders of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So we talked about the high-profile individuals. We talked about Comey and Brennan and Clapper and some of the underlings. But we're not talking enough about the President of the United States, who essentially authorized it, who was basically trafficking in the notion of a soft coup. Didn't like the outcome of the election. We'll fix that.
Right. This was in December. This was early December.
December is when this was authorized.
2016.
So they knew they had a limited window. They had to get this ICA done before Inauguration Day. So you do the math. When you take any other ICA, which typically takes months to complete, and it's an IC assessment, intelligence community, that means we're going to bring in multiple elements, not just the CIA, but other elements of the intelligence community will be contributing to this product. Brennan basically ran this deal.
Yeah.
He ran it out of the CIA. Yeah, there may have been technically other elements of the IC made contributions, but he ultimately edited and approved and disapproved, whatever. He was the guy calling the shots.
And what is obvious is that is that first wheel. Now, we didn't know about it at the time, but that's the first wheel that we're really seeing, where now there's just a huge distrust in our intelligence community.
So here's what happened. Because, in my opinion, Brennan should have never been director of the CIA, because he was an analyst. He was never an operative. He was never an officer, a case officer. He never worked in the DO, that's the Directorate of Operations. He was an analyst. Now, I'm not going to broad brush and malign every analyst in the intelligence community, but what I am going to say is that he, as an analyst, imparted a culture, first in the CIA, that percolated out over the entire IC, that politicized intelligence analysis. They weaponized it.
Yeah.
He was responsible for introducing a culture in the CIA that retooled what was supposed to be objective analysis and turned into the politicization of intelligence and turned it into a weaponization against President Trump.
We hear basically like 30,000-foot view, they framed Donald Trump for treason, and I think they committed treason in the process. But have you ever given any thought, and I'm sure you have, to how like Russia feels about this, or Vladimir Putin? Because they not only framed Trump for treason, they also knowingly just said that Russia basically installed President Trump, And I've often wondered, and I'm not an apologist for Russia, but I've often wondered if one of the obstacles to peace between Ukraine and Russia is that Vladimir Putin doesn't trust that the intel community has been brought to heel. And I don't know if that's sounds crazy or not, but it's just a thought that I had.
I don't know that there's necessarily any connective tissue there. I mean, one doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. However, I mean, I can understand how you would get to that question. But here's the thing that I think everybody needs to understand. The Russians, formerly the Soviets, have been engaged in malign influence in our country probably since World War I, but very aggressively since World War II. And what that looks like, I mean, across the social spectrum, the political spectrum, they are here, and they have availed themselves of this permissive environment that is our open society, and they're very good at exploiting it. Is it sufficient for them to change the outcome of an election? I don't think so. But they continue to engage in malign influence of a political nature, of a social nature, of an economic nature, you name it. They are trying to undermine the United States through malign influence operations. And, covert, some of their stuff is overt. You compare our culture and our society to, for example, Russia or China. I mean, it is very difficult for us to work in what we call a hostile environment. That's a hostile environment. Mm-hmm. Russia's a hostile environment, China. And then we have denied areas, North Korea and Iran. Well, guess who's really good at exploiting our open and permissive society? Iran. Mm-hmm. They're really good at cyber. China, of course, in every category, they're involved. They're doing stuff. Heck, they're here in the 1st District trying to buy farmland, trying to engage in commerce. And people go, oh, look, this is great for economic development. Not for our economy. It's good for their economy.
Oh, sure.
But it's not good for us here. And so, I mean, we need to go into this clear-eyed, but we need to understand that the Russians have been doing this for a long, long time. Was that sufficient to alter the outcome of the election? Clearly not, because the data show, the evidence is clear that if Putin had a preference, it was Hillary.
It was Hillary, for sure.
He deliberately withheld information to use against her when she became president. This was what you might call compromise. It was whatever you might want to call it. On the other side of election, now I got her. Mm-hmm. If she doesn't play ball, if she's not going to bend to our will, give a little more, then I've always got these cards. I can put this right in front of her. That's how they play the game. Keep in mind, Putin is a former KGB officer, and his desire is to reconstitute the Soviet Union. Now, he might not call it the Soviet Union, but look at what has happened on Putin's watch in places like Georgia and, of course, Ukraine and others. Why do you think the Baltic nations joined NATO? Why do you think Finland and Sweden joined NATO? Because they knew he was getting extremely belligerent and wanted to reconstitute, protect Mother Russia, and he engaged in a border incursion in Georgia. Why is that? Because you can't join NATO if your border's in dispute.
Right.
So the only way for Georgia to have joined NATO would have been for them to accept that border incursion as a sovereign. Okay, we're ceding that to Russia, but we're going to join. They don't want to do that. They want their territory back. We're 20 years on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those borders are still there. And guess what? They have permanent infrastructure in those regions that they've intruded into Georgia. That was their reason. That's why they annexed Crimea. We got to stop Ukraine from the potential of joining NATO. And what they did after, on Obama's watch, by the way, in 2014, that went unchecked, never offered a bit of help to the Ukrainian people. And then Putin goes into the Donbass region and starts giving up to 200,000 citizens Russian passports so that he can create the pretext that he's going in to rescue Russian citizens.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
So that's been going on for a long, long time. I said all that to say this. Back to your original question, are people going to be held to account? I hope so. I'm doing everything I can. I'm putting the information out there. What the DOJ chooses to do with that information remains to be seen. But I think we've made a pretty strong case that there are a lot of people involved in this that need to be held to account. And in the meantime, we can pray for biological regime change in Russia, and maybe the outcomes will start to change a little bit. But the situation in Ukraine is probably not going to get any better as long as Putin is calling the shots in Russia.
Wow.
For the layperson out there that might be listening, I do want to get to Arkansas farming, but for the in terms of your daily briefings. So you receive, if I'm correct about this, you receive the same daily briefing as the President of the United States.
Probably not exactly. I receive what's called Gang of Eight. There's a limited number of people who actually receive that. Sometimes Gang of Eight may be presidential level, but not always. So he's going to get stuff that we don't get at Gang of Eight level.
Okay.
But it's pretty high level stuff that the rest of the committee doesn't get.
Right.
And just so you know what the Gang of Eight is, that's the chairman and ranking member of the Intel Committee, the chairman and ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee, the majority and minority leader in the House, that's the Speaker of the House and the minority leader, and then the majority and minority leader in the Senate. Those are the 8 individuals who receive Gang of 8 intelligence.
Okay. How do you physically receive that intelligence?
Typically what they'll do is it may be through a secure communications. In some cases it might be physically brought to our SCIF, which is what you call a secure compartmented information facility. Sometimes we go there. It depends on the sensitivity of it.
Yeah.
You have high side communications channels that we can receive certain levels of classification on. In many cases, it might be what they call an in-camera read, where you just go look at it, and you only have a limited time to look at it and go, okay, and you got to carry that around with you in your brain.
That's incredible. One of 8 people. I mean, that kind of makes you one of the most important people in the country, if not the world.
Don't tell my kids that.
Yeah. Like you're just sad. You're just sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you? I mean, forgive I'm just a layperson. You guys have been involved with this a lot longer than I have, but I mean, could you pick up the phone and call President Trump?
In theory,
yeah.
You see, one of the things I try to do, I told you, I try to be conscious of what I'm capable of, and I also try to respect political relationships and not abuse them. Could I call President Trump? If I absolutely had to and I thought it was extremely important, then yes. Or the White House Chief of Staff. I am very, very reticent to do that because, particularly in my position, I don't want to call him and go, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I hear you're golfing this weekend. Or,
Right.
If they hear from me, it's going to be for a legitimate reason. It's going to be because something bad either is we think might happen or has happened, and vice versa. They'll call me if the situation needs it. But I just try to be really, really respectful of those contacts, and I don't want to abuse that because I want to make sure that he knows I'm serious about my job and that the people around him know that I'm serious about it. And if we're having a conversation, it's legit. I'm a credible source for them, and they don't dismiss. Oh, that's just Crawford calling up. Don't worry about that. I'm not that cry wolf guy.
That's incredibly encouraging, though. That is so good because that means when you do speak, they're going to listen.
Yeah, to your point, Congressman, if you did put in that call, President Trump's probably going to answer it because he's like, this is something serious, or he wouldn't be calling.
Because I do not do that. And no, he knows who the chairman of HIPSI is. It's his responsibility to know who the players are. He knows, but he also knows, and I think this is good, and I think it's good for the people of the district and the state that I represent, is not abusing those privileges. And I think I try to reflect the best of our district in being respectful of those kinds of relationships.
Well, we've talked about it how on the show that it's pretty neat that you're the chair of the House Intel and the chair of the Senate Intel is also from Arkansas.
Yeah, when will that ever happen again?
There are all kinds of conspiracy theories about that.
like what's going on in Arkansas?
What's up with Arkansas?
Yeah.
We know all about that.
We're really important now, though. Yeah. That's what it means. We've kept you over the allotted time, but I do want to ask an Arkansas farming question.
Sure.
Obviously, in Northeast Arkansas, probably 3-4 weeks ago now, the big meeting in Brooklyn. You did have some good news where Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced a deal with the Taiwan and getting markets to our farmers. But I know you're aware of this crisis and you want to help.
So listen, I have not strayed and will not stray from my roots, which is agriculture. I have woven agriculture into the intelligence picture, but believe me, I'm talking to farmers every day. I was just in Lake Village day before yesterday talking to a bunch of farmers down there. We're going to be talking to farmers in Stuttgart. I don't know when that's going to be, maybe next week. More farmers in this district have my cell number probably than anybody else. So I am keenly aware. That's my educational background. That's practical experience. I'm keenly aware of what's taking place in agriculture. And there are a lot of things going on. And one of the things that I'm encouraged by, number one, is our governor gets it. And she's leaned forward on this. So that's good. That's a partnership that I can't overstate the importance of, that she understands that. Number two, seeing some very encouraging news from the White House that suggests that they're going to direct some tariff revenue for farm relief.
We talked about on the show that would be
that's really
ideal.
important. And this is not unlike sort of what they did in 2017 when they first implemented Section 232 tariffs on steel, having a negative impact in ag sector. So they did what they called a market facilitation payment using CCC money. This way they can replenish CCC money with tariff revenue. That will probably come sometime after October 15th. But this relief has got to come before December.
Yes.
Because if it doesn't, we're looking on the other side in January. There's going to be potentially some bankruptcies, and we're going to lose a lot of farmers. And we don't want to see that happen, because we've already seen way too much consolidation take place in every sector of production agriculture and the supply chain inputs, as well as on the marketing side. We don't want to see any further consolidation, because we respect capitalism in this country, and we don't want to see this de facto vertical integration model. That's what sets our farmers apart.
I mean, we had Stephen Leininger on, who's in the ag business, last week talking about this, and I was blown away that the price of corn hasn't changed since the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And yet all the inputs, you know.
Here's the thing you need to understand. Corn's trading for $4 a bushel. You know how much a bushel of seed corn costs? About $400.
Good grief.
So do the math on production costs versus what you can make. Now, look, I'll also say, for people who say we don't need to support farmers, well, don't say that with the mouth full, because agriculture is an integral part of national security. A country that can't feed and clothe itself is vulnerable. And the evidence is China.
Yeah.
Less than 20% of their land mass is arable. They rely on everything from outside of their country to be able to feed and clothe 1.5 billion people. That's a strategic vulnerability for them, and they know it, and it's manifest in extremely belligerent behavior. That's why they act the way they do. We, on the other hand, have the freedom to engage in this enterprise and take it for granted. But during COVID, when we went to the grocery store as Americans and saw the back of the shelf or the bottom of the meat case, panic ensues, because that doesn't happen. But you any grocery store in this town during COVID, and you were going, what the heck? We don't want to see that happen here. And countries that have that scenario daily are extremely volatile and vulnerable. And I've been to these places. I've been to the best grocery store in Cuba, and I can tell you I wouldn't buy dog food at this place. And the folks at the embassy, I specifically said, take me to the best grocery store in Havana. Y'all, you would cringe if you saw it.
Wow.
I've seen what their farmers markets are selling for rice. Would not make dog food here in the United States.
Oh, wow.
I'm telling you, we've got it so good here. It shouldn't be controversial at all to support American agriculture.
And we produce more than what we actually consume, correct? So we have a surplus of
our farmers are they're just so doggone good. They're so productive. And, even here, I mean, okay, corn production here in the South, for example, up north, they'll say, well, you can't grow corn down south like we do up here. That's bull. We got guys bumping 300 bushel corn here. I mean, it's amazing. We've got guys in, our yields in soybeans. If you're not yielding to 50 plus, you're not trying hard. I mean, you got guys that are, 65, 80 bushel soybeans. I mean, it's and maybe more than that in some isolated areas. But I'm just telling you, we know how to produce in this country, but it's in our interest to make sure that the Americans are supporting agriculture, because food security is national security.
Amen. I totally agree.
Well, so when we had a farmer on last week or week before, he said there was a two-pronged problem right now, and one of them was the relief that you mentioned, and so I'm glad to hear that that's on the horizon.
Me too.
Right, end of November, all of these payments are coming due, and what people do not realize is you're just thinking about the farmer, but when that bankruptcy is filed, there are so many people that are affected.
The entire community. So we don't think about this as much in Jonesboro because we have a very diverse economy here by comparison. Go down to Stuttgart and see how this is going to impact Stuttgart or McGee or Dumas or Lake Village or Mariana or, Osceola or, a lot of these communities that are, just
nothing but fields.
Newport. This is it. I mean, that's their livelihood. It affects everybody. Yeah. And so it's going to have an inordinate impact in these small rural communities.
Wow. Well, this has been a great opportunity, Rick. I really appreciate you coming on the program.
You bet.
Congratulations for being the chair of the Intel. I know that's been a lot of hard work, but I mean, I'm super proud that you're my congressman and that you're doing the work of the people and holding people accountable. So
your next thing, I guess, is primaries, right? Do you have a primary opponent announced so far?
Haven't heard anything so far.
I don't anticipate that happening.
Somebody going to
jump in. A few weeks away. Yeah. I think we're in pretty good shape. Like I said, it's the honor of a lifetime to be able to do this type of work, and this is why I do it. I do it for the people here in Arkansas. I do it for my, the future of my family, but not just my family, but for y'all and your kids and what country they're going to inherit. It's on us to give them something to inherit that they can be proud of.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
The third you see no hotline.